In today's show, the Blazers make noise as their season comes to an end. The 2024 season in the books, and Chauncey Billups gets a new contract. He's here for 3 more years. We got a lot to talk about. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's program, we did it. We made it to the end. We're going to talk about the whole thing that happened. The end of the 2024-2025 regular season comes to an end, just where we thought the Blazers would be, with 36 wins and fighting for the play-in to the final 10 days of the regular season, just like you knew, and just like certainly I knew way back in the fall. Plus, Chauncey Billups gets a new contract. He gets his option year picked up and 2 years tacked on, 3 more years committed to the Blazers head coach as they want to see this vision and this version of the Blazers into the future. A big day on the final day of the regular season that ended with a beatdown of some of the Los Angeles Lakers. We will get into all of that. We will recap the entire season as we do. We'll talk about the big news. Like, this is huge. This is the seismic news. There is no coaching search because the coach was here all along. The Blazers have committed to Chauncey Billups. We'll talk all about that throughout today's program, including at length in the second segment. And then, this is maybe like step 3 of many steps to get where they want to go. And I want to talk about what is still ahead of them and the challenge that has faced a previous version of the Blazers, a previous iteration of the Blazers that seems to be rearing its head a bit, or at least peeking out from under the covers. So you gotta see if you could push that monster right back under the bed. We'll talk about that in the third segment. Let's do with the fastest recap in the West. The 2024-2025 season edition of your fastest recap in the West. NBA seasons really start in September. That's when players flow back to their home cities, get back in the gym, and start working out together. It's when they start to get to know each other, appreciate each other, and start to build the habits that are going to lead them to do what they do during the regular season. But the games don't begin in earnest till October. And when the Blazers season began in earnest in October, the 2024-2025 season kicked off with the worst home opener in franchise history. The Blazers lost 140-104 to the Golden State Warriors, a 36-point beatdown. Less than 3 weeks later, back in that same building that had kicked off the season with the worst home opener in franchise history, the Blazers lost to the shorthanded Memphis Grizzlies by 45. Prompting Chauncey Billups to call out his team and challenge them, saying that if they slept well after a loss like that, they were bleeping losers. And amazingly, this same Blazers team, those bleeping losers, would lose by another 42 points at home against the Utah Jazz. That's after the bleeping losers lost. They lose another one at home. At midseason, the Blazers are 13-28. They're riding a 6-game losing streak despite winning probably 3 or 4 more games than many of the preseason prognosticators would have thought during that opening 41. They're still pretty rough. They're 27th on offense at the midway point of the season, 28th on defense. Bottom 3 in both offense and defense, 13-28. This was a bad basketball team headed for another loss-filled season, and then they weren't. Heading to the January 19th game against the Chicago Bulls, Chauncey Billups made a move in the starting lineup, benching or at least removing Shaedon Sharpe, third-year guard wing Shaedon Sharpe from the starting lineup, moving him to the bench, starting a little bit bigger, a little bit with a little more size, and increasing your more sort of defensive wings on the court, adding Jeremy Grant, Tumani Kamara, and Denny Avdia to your starting lineup to go a little bit bigger up front. And the Blazers started winning. Like, for real, they started winning and stopped losing. Over the next 18 days, the Blazers would win 10 of 11 games and launch a second-half resurgence. Now, it wasn't all just moving Shaedon Sharpe out of the starting lineup, but that was the catalyst for what really changed for the Blazers. During the second half of the season, they were 23-18. They were 20th on offense during the final 41 games and third on defense with a positive 3.3 net rating, outscoring their opponents by 3.3 points per 100 possessions, according to Clean the Glass, over the final 41 games of the regular season. That stretch included a breakout from fifth-year forward Deni Avdija, who in 20 games after the All-Star break averaged 23 points, 9.7 boards, 5.2 assists on impressive shooting splits, 50.8% from the floor, 41.7% from three on nearly 6 3-point attempts per game, and 78% from the free throw line. Toumani Camara emerged as a defensive anchor at the point of attack and on the wing. Camara broke out so much that he is not only appreciated here in the Pacific Northwest outpost of the NBA, but he will be a name that either is going to make an all-defense team when they announce it here in the coming weeks, or will be a notable snub if he is not included. Toumani Camara has arrived on a national scene, getting national respect because he locks fools down. And to varying degrees, the Blazers' recent draft picks, lottery picks, I should say, also found their footing, which helped with this breakout. Shaedon Sharpe, even after the benching, played better basketball down the stretch of the season. Scoot Henderson looked his best during the Blazers' winning streak in mid-January into mid-February, and Donovan Clingan emerged as a true defensive force, maybe still finding where he's going to fit in and how he's going to fit on offense, but already showing his strengths as a defender and a giant person protecting the rim. And to be certain, the Blazers don't win the games they did in January without the contributions of higher-paid young veterans like DeAndre Ayton. Jeremy Grant, for all of his struggles this year, was a useful cog on the defense that helped sort of launch them when they got going initially in January, although the Blazers continue to play pretty much fine without JG in the lineup. And Anthony Simons, for all of his struggles this year with consistency, was a huge part of the successful lineups the Blazers trotted out consistently when they got going. The Blazers found their footing, and they held on to it, including in Sunday's regular season finale, a matinee back at the Moda Center, back where they lost by 36 on opening night, back where they lost by 42 to the Jazz and 45 to the Grizzlies back in November and December, back when these things were embarrassing at the beginning of the season, and this looked lost. Instead, the Blazers wrapped up the season thumping their rivals. Certainly a shorthanded version of the Lakers with their playoff seeding all wrapped up. They rolled out Dalton Knecht and LeBron James' son, but it didn't matter because the Blazers thrashed them 109-81 in the final outing of the 2024-2025 season. It probably did matter, quite frankly, but you know what I'm trying to say. The Blazers won going away against a team with no interest in winning. The Blazers said, we're interested in winning now, and we have been for 41 games. The Blazers won 15 more games than a season ago, the third biggest single-season win increase in franchise history. And those rewards, that success in the final back half of the 41 games, led to contract extensions and doubling down on a group that exists. Blazers GM Joe Cronin was awarded a multi-year contract, and on Sunday morning, after it was reported first locally by Dwight Jaynes here in Portland that the Blazers had a multi-year contract in place for Chauncey Billups, the Blazers announced it early on a Sunday morning around 8:30 a.m. ahead of a morning media session and a matinee game against the Lakers to wrap up the season, that Chauncey Billups had been extended for multiple seasons. According to Chris Haynes, the deal includes and I believe Chum Strani of ESPN, the deal includes picking up Chauncey's team option for this coming season in 2025-2026 and tacking 2 years onto that one. Billups, after getting this team to play darn good basketball, or at least consistently competent basketball for 41 games to close the season, is rewarded with a new contract. He gets his deal. And that's the season. Fastest recap in the West. What happens next is fascinating. And what happens next is Chauncey Billups is going to guide this ship. There is no coaching search coming. There is no, if this offseason was supposed to be about, this group, this version of, the Caterpillar took all these steps. The Blazers are going to go into the brief cocoon of June and July and emerge in the fall as a young butterfly. Nah, this Caterpillar's trudging on, baby. There's more to do, and this particular group is not emerging as a totally different thing. It's emerging as the same thing still growing. It is indeed just a bigger caterpillar. Let's talk about Billups. Let's talk about the contract extension. Let's talk about what it means and all of those things, because I think this is both a little bit surprising and not at all surprising. It is a very believable scenario, even in a way that, like, oh wow, I can't believe that. I can't believe they did it. Wait, I can totally believe they did exactly this. Let's talk about it in the second segment. We'll get deep in on Billups' contract and what's next for the Blazers. Join me there, won't you? First, though, let's talk Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. And look, it's the playoffs on the hardwood. It's the playoffs on the ice. Basketball, hockey, it's all there for you. The WNBA isn't that far away either, and there's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. You can even combine players across sports, basketball, hockey, baseball while it's rolling along, WNBA when it gets going, and you can, for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So you've got the NHL playoffs, you're going to get the NBA playoffs, you got baseball rolling along every day. Whether you're comfortable in one of those sports or want to mix and match, you can make it happen. And then Prize Picks also has promos like Taco Tuesday, where they discount player projections up to 25% for even more value. And plus, when you win, the payouts are fast, safe, and secure. So download the app today and use that code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. You just got to play it. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's program is also brought to you by the good folks over there at WayFair, who know that it is spring and it means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, WayFair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. So if you're making small updates, like you need, stylish cabinet hardware, or major upgrades like new vanity sinks or outdoor lighting, WayFair has quality products for every budget. I am currently working on upgrading my laundry room, and WayFair has a great selection to look through. Check out all the styles and all of the budgets, all that meet my budgets, and kind of see things that maybe I didn't know that were going to catch my eye, or didn't know that were my style, or just find things that are right up my alley. Plus, they got free and fast shipping, so it's easy to get it to you when you need it. And they've got the big brands, like GE and Moan. Shopping will be seamless, and you can find exactly what you need to fit your space, to fit your style, to fit your budget. WayFair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. All right. Chauncey Billups got the job. It was always his job, I guess, and he got his deal. He'll be here for 3 more years. There is no coaching search, as I mentioned, first reported by Dwight Jaynes here locally, and then officially announced after some reporting from the national media by the Blazers on Sunday morning. I think a couple things are true. One, right here on this program, I had made the educated guess that I did not think Chauncey Billups would be back, because I had heard whispers that Chauncey Billups was pretty darn popular other places, and no specific whispers from anyone around here in Portland that the Blazers were making real strides to retain him. And I had obviously, as I said here, it was an educated guess. It was an incorrect guess, because the Blazers, as reported by the Oregonian, kind of once they got Cronin locked up to a multi-year extension, moved to do the same with Billups. It happened quickly over the last week to finalize that deal. I think a couple things are true. This is not particularly surprising based on the way the Blazers have done business recently, but it is a little bit surprising considering how late into the season it actually happened. They had a lot of time to exercise Chauncey Billups' team option. They had a lot of times to make a long-term commitment to him. But quite frankly, through the first 41 games of even this season, which is the exact 3.5 mark year of his tenure in Portland, Chauncey Billups hadn't done a damn thing to earn a new contract extension. Smart basketball mind, incredible talker. I love him in the media, and like a person that the players who play for him respect and enjoy playing for. But the job is won on the court. Like in some ways, results are not that important for a team like the Blazers, and I'll argue that in a moment here, but they are also the only concrete thing you can point to as a sign that what I'm doing works, and I think undoubtedly Chauncey Billups did his best work this season. You can quibble with whether the Blazers should have been trying to win games to the extent that they ended up winning games, but you can't quibble with the number of victories. Those are real. They happened on the court. Like the process is maybe worth quibbling with, but the fact of the matter is that they won those games and that the defense improved and was legitimately good for the final 40-plus games of the regular season. Heading into this game against the Lakers, the Blazers were fourth in defense through the final 40 games of the regular season. After the Lakers and like playing against Dalton Connect and Bronny, they moved up to third in defense over the final 41 games, both on Cleaning the Glass Down and NBA.com. So I mean, some of this was a little Sunday magic, but even if you want to say that game 82s are all fake, they were a top 5 defense for the final 41 games of the regular season. I think in general, Chauncey Billups probably did get promoted because the Blazers won 23 of their final 41 games and had that good defense. But I think the criticisms of Chauncey over the first 3 years, ones that use winning and win percentage, and you will see on the internet people throwing out Chauncey Billups' win percentage, which is horrendous. It's part of, I guess, the overall legacy and resume, but I think it largely misses the point. It's not that he didn't lose those games. And it's not that he didn't lose a lot of games, but at times his job was specifically to lose a lot of games. You would be better served pointing to the specific times where Chauncey Billups was tasked with winning games. The first year on the job, the first half of his second year on the job when he failed to do so, as opposed to taking the larger sample, which includes stretches of upwards of 35 consecutive games where the Blazers were dead set on losing and Chauncey Billups was doing the thing he was supposed to do. I think the criticism for me of Billups was more about failing to deliver on something that looked cohesive and intentional than it was about wins and losses. Billups and the Blazers front office spent years at media days talking about identity that they would establish, only for each iteration of Billups' teams to never resemble that identity in any way, shape, or form for any sustained period until this season, when not only did they win basketball games and probably help Chauncey Billups extend his tenure here, but they actually looked like the team that Chauncey had always promised he'd field. They were feisty on defense. They were physical. They got after it. They didn't get punked. And why I mentioned some of the blowouts early in the season is there was a time, even this year, when this team looked pillow soft, like you could bully them. And then they stopped being bullies, or stopped getting bullied and became the bullies. The Blazers were a physical team that, even though they did have significantly more success against under 500 teams than above 500 teams this season. Like as so many teams do, don't get it twisted. They were 12-29 against teams above 500 and 23-17 against teams below 500. But they were physical. They were tough to deal with, even if they were losing. Early in the season, 14 of the first 28 losses were by at least 20 points. They stopped getting blown out with regularity, or at least with the extreme regularity in the second half of the season. And I think the truth of Chauncey is twofold. Coaches get better, and Chauncey Billups learned on the job. He's a better coach now in April of 2025 than he was in either of certainly his first 2 seasons and probably 3 on the job, when he can never, and particularly those first two, when he can never coax any real success out of rosters that were supposed to win, or at least year two is like theoretically supposed to win. Year one, supposed to win, no good. Year two, theoretically supposed to win, no good. Not only did Chauncey Billups, though, improve as a coach, he got better at things and sort of the minutia of coaching and getting, and again, getting your team play to the identity. The roster around him got better. That's how it works. I guess the rub here is like how much better and how much credit do you give the roster? How much better did Billups get and how much credit do you give the roster? No coach wins without good players. That's not how the league works. It's never how the league has worked. Look at every legendary coach, right? You know what the defining thread of all the great legends of our time? They all coached A1 legendary players. That's how it works. The best coaches coach the best players because players help you win ball games. And when Billups had a better roster, he won more games. And when a coach wins more games, we typically say they're better coaches because that is the job, factually, is to win more games. It's not always the job, and it certainly wasn't always the job during Billups' tenure. Here's the question, though, for the Blazers. They're not conducting a search. They're not conducting a coaching search. They're not going to. There was no way. Only people who just refuse to understand the politics of NBA coaching thought that there was a world in which Billups would have his team option picked up and coach another lame duck season. Your reward for doing your best job is to do it all over again. There was no way that was going to happen. The only way he was going to be retained is in this situation, right? Is if the Blazers wanted him to be their coach, they need to extend him for multiple seasons, and they've done it. There's not going to be a coaching search. There's going to be good names on that you're familiar with, Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone's out there available to coach. And there are probably good coaches that out there that we've never heard of who are on benches and in gyms in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. There isn't a world where you're going to have an expansive look of candidates that could possibly upgrade the roster because the Blazers believe the person or upgrade the quality of the team. The roster is a separate issue than team success. I don't mean to conflate those two things. The Blazers believe that person who can help this team take the next step is already on the roster. It's Chauncey Billups. I think factually he did his – I think you can't even quibble with this. He did his best work over the final 3 months of this season. And the Blazers were competent and good and competitive. Whether that means he should be rewarded, I think is, to your own decision. The way I view it is that I think you could make a compelling case that Billups deserves to be back based on the success they've had this year. I have a little bit of trouble figuring out who gets credit for the Blazers' young players developing. I'm a little shaky on giving that credit to Billups because, well, I do think Denny Avdia had his best year. Toumani Camara took a big step forward. I mean this as an honest, I don't know the answer to this question, but I'll leave this query here. It's do we think Billups helped Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson get from where they started to where they are, or do you think Billups was part of the challenge and from them getting from where they started to where they are? I think players mostly develop kind of independent of individual head coaches, but I do think the larger program, like the Blazers as a developmental entity, can help guys develop along the way. But when Billups, reduced some of Scoot's playing time and reduced some of Shaedon Sharpe's playing time, those guys played well in the second half of the season. Whether that is a sort of direct response to a certain style of coaching or just the nature of getting older in the league, I think that's that's maybe in the eyes of the beholder. I don't really know how I'm a little shaky on giving Chauncey developmental credit. What I will give him credit for is the identity. The Blazers played to an identity. You know what type of basketball they're going to play every night. And I think that is very meaningful. But it is only step one. Because what do the Blazers have done here by committing to Billups, a coach who's done his best work over the last 3 months and turned the Blazers into a competent and high-level defense since the middle of January for that second half of the season, third in defense, right? This is kind of the way we judge coaches. Is the thing you were supposed to do, did it work? Seems like the thing Billups is supposed to do, be this better defensive coach, seems like is working, right? But the challenge is because the Blazers aren't changing anything, because it's going to now look the same. GM, coach, and many of the players, presumably, That's where the challenge lies. And it's a challenge that is familiar to Blazer fans if you've been around a while. Join me, and we'll talk about the familiarity and the challenge ahead in the third segment. First, though, I want to tell you about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And the NBA playoffs are upon us. And when the NBA playoffs are upon us and the official sports betting partner of the NBA is a sponsor of this program, well, you know they're going to hook it up because right now, FanDuel lets you place your first $5 bet and you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Place your first $5 bet, place it on something you're confident on, and if you win right there on the FanDuel app, if you are a first-time user, we're getting the NBA playoffs first to play in the playoffs this weekend, a week of fun postseason basketball. You get $250 in bonus bets to play with. And so then you can, chase all the player props you want. You can even combine those live prop bets into a same game parlay if you really want to juice them and for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Still a pass versus point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Come with me in the not-so-far-back machine to the Damian Lillard era with the Blazers. We are now 2 years post-Lillard. I believe that's what they call AD in this part of the world. That's after Dame. We're 2 years after Dame. This is 2 AD. Well, if we go back in the before times, the Damian Lillard era was, or at least the challenges and maybe the failings of the Damian Lillard era, was defined by a recurring trope. And to be clear, the decade of Damian Lillard, decade of Dame, saw significantly more success than the decade prior of Blazers basketball. Damian Lillard ushered in the Blazers out of the dark ages into being a consistently competitive team for a long time. What I am mostly talking about is putting a ceiling on what it could be, not like actually failing. It's saying like this was a very successful roster and a very successful era, but it had a limited ceiling because the defining characteristic of roster building during the Damian Lillard era, and I've used this before, I'm hearkening back to a prior term, a classic Mike Richmond term, shout out to my everydayers and longtime listeners, is the Blazers continued to mistake good fortune for proof of concept. It happened most notably in the summers of 2016 and again in 2019, but this trope is eventually what put a firm ceiling on the Damian Lillard era, a steadfast commitment to continuity and a tendency to quadruple down on successful moments. Whether the Blazers were unwilling or unable to trade Damian Lillard's successful, undersized but talented combo guard next to him, it doesn't matter. But the Blazers are faced with something pretty familiar. Their current roster, or at least the coming months, are just a test in the immediate AD era. Whether they could be subject to the same type of pitfalls. The Blazers, by re-upping Joe Cronin, by re-upping Chauncey Billups, they've leaned into continuity. They are valuing continuity. Ownership rewarded a successful season by extending Joe Cronin and extending Chauncey Billups, and they're heading into a summer with limited forced roster changes, right? Like, if Delano Benson's going to enter free agency, Jabari Walker's going to enter free agency. Nobody else is going anywhere by force. The Blazers will have to make choices to change the roster to alter it in any way. The current roster is obviously ripe for internal growth, right? They've got with Sharp and Henderson and Klingon, and also like, while Denny Avdija is entering his 6th NBA season, he's not yet 25. Toumani Camara will be 26 when the season starts, but again, he's in year 3. I don't know if he's going to make these massive leaps, but these are young players who can obviously get better. But there are decisions to be made, and the Blazers will enter next season with expectations of at least being decent, right? Maybe not being like, I think some fans will say, like, this is the 5th best team in the West. Let's go. And I don't want to say that to those dear fans that you're wild, because it's April and we'll see what happens. But the sort of the more general and broader expectations of the Blazers be competitive next year. I believe that it'll be fairly typical to say the Blazers will take a step forward. They haven't played a season with expectations over the past 2, and you could argue 3 seasons. They've had 0 expectations. All of that said, right? Like, the Blazers, they've doubled down on continuity. There's value in continuity. They have committed to this core. This core showed that it's, competitive enough for the last 41 games that committing to it is not an insane thing to do, but it is a very similar feel to the past iterations, right? Where they said, mistaking good fortune, winning 44 games, having Chris Paul and Blake Griffin get hurt, and making the second round of the playoffs immediately post LaMarcus Aldridge as like proof of concept, as proof you've made it. And if the Blazers say, we won 36 games, but if you shorten it enough, and if you like shrink the scope down, they actually were 23-18. They had the 3rd best defense in the league after the All-Star break. That profiles as something like, with a differential of +3, that actually profiles as closer to a 51 win team than a 41 win team. So we think like if the challenge is not mistaking good fortune for proof of concept, it's continuing to get to take all of the opportunities you can to get better. It does not mean specifically taking major risks or major swings, something that the previous front office of the Blazers would not do during the Damian Lillard era. But like it probably does mean that continuity cannot be your only path forward. And all of that said, this season of Blazers basketball, and I want this to be a big takeaway, and I apologize for doing it 30 minutes into the show, but thanks for sticking with me. This season of Blazers basketball was the most satisfying as a Blazers fan, and I'm speaking for you, so tell me if I'm wrong here. Most satisfying season of Blazer fandom since the 2019 Western Conference Finals run. The seasons that followed were not fun. The COVID season was not fun. That team sucked, and then Damian Lillard went off for 8 games, and then they got thrashed out of the playoffs. The following year, it all fell apart. Damian Lillard played about as good a basketball game that you could possibly play against the Nuggets. CJ McCollum steps out of bounds. Robert Covington misses a dunk, and the whole era of Terry Stotts, Damian Lillard basketball implodes. And then the following years are the Billups years, which have not been rewarding at all. This is the best run that they've had since 2019. The most satisfying, the most easily appreciable of a fan. Like, it was rewarding to root for this team and watch them find parts that fits and watch them play games for a couple months that were like competitive basketball. They weren't high level, majorly meaningful games by any means. I'm not trying to sell you on that. But like, they played competitive basketball every night for a few months for the first time, and like, we're out to win with a young core that you feel like they can build with for the first time in a long time. This was a rewarding season. And that's the test as they move forward, is how do they go about taking the next steps? Can they make both sort of the necessary moves, right? Like, you've got to figure out what to do with Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant, and to some extent DeAndre Ayton. Whether the thing to do with them is nothing and let them walk, or if it is to in free agency in the next summer, or if it is in Ayton and Simons' case, or if it is to give them more extend their contracts and make them part of the core. They got to figure that out. So for my money, both of those guys should be moved, but that's a conversation for further down the line. That's like, we've got many months to dive into that. But they've got to make the necessary moves and also come out on the right side of the riskier propositions. Like, you have to at some point take real risks, because they're what they're trying to do is navigate from a good 36 win team. That's what they are. They're a team that won 36 games and they look pretty good doing it. But they won 36 games in the Western Conference, where a team that finished in 8th place this year won 48. The bar for making it even to the low levels of the playoffs are outrageously high. And to navigate from where they are to where they need to be, which is something much more formidable, is a lot. And I would say my number one cause for concern, that's not even cause for concern, my number one yellow flag, the thing that is putting up sort of the minor caution flag here, is mistaking good fortune for proof of concept. Leaning into continuity, doing it again, running it back, thinking that this worked so it'll work again. The last era of Blazers basketball was successful in large part because of that continuity. It was the thing that they leaned into and leaned on and pointed to as a strength, and quite frankly, it was. But it also limited how good that team could be because they never took the necessary risks or broke down the sort of parts that didn't fit perfectly, broke off, I should say, the parts that didn't fit perfectly enough. They said, this will work, let's do it again. And they won, they had a couple 50-win teams in there. They made the Western Conference Finals in 2019. They won several playoff series with iterations of the Dame era. But mistaking good fortune for proof of concept is what took a young team building with Dame and put a cap on them as, yeah, you'll be fine. And if you'll be competitive, and if things break your way, you'll have a chance. And the Blazers haven't committed to that, right? They have a runway here to do that. But what I come away from this season and the news that happened today with Billups is thinking, like, I hope they don't mistake good fortune for proof of concept. Because the path forward is hard still. And that's what the rest of these shows will be about. Again, I think this was a rewarding season. I think Chauncey Billups did his best work, and he was rewarded for his best work with a new contract to keep doing his best work. And the Blazers are saying, this is the coach that works for us. We like the work he's done with our young players. He's taken, Shaedon Sharpe played his best basketball at the end of the season. Scoot Henderson looked way better in year 2 than year 1. Denny Avdia had a breakout season. Like, all of the young guys you hope are part of the core played well under Billups, right? That is why you get the job and move forward. He earned, if nothing else, you can see how he, earned, I guess is maybe too loaded of a word here. It is easy to see how that decision was made if you allow yourself to accept, like, the way this works. Earned is maybe a judgmental thing for you to, deserve got nothing to do with it, famously. But I think what's next and what's coming is the thing that will define this era. It's not Billups. It's not Billups for 3 more seasons. He's an NBA coach. He can get fired at any time. Like, if it's not the right choice, they can literally fire him at any time. It's a little bit harder to fire front offices because it's like a bigger move. But these are none of the league is so fickle. And to avoid the fickle nature of it, you have to be willing to self-assess. And I think that's the challenge for the Blazers. What's real? What isn't? What has to be done? What can we be patient with? How much do we value continuity? And what parts of that continuity are actual strengths? And what parts of those continuities are comfortable crutches that help us get to where we need to go? Or feel like they help us get to where we want to go, but maybe don't give us the opportunity to take those bigger leaps. On this show, we'll get into all of it. That's what we're going to do. Coming months. Listen, Locked on Blazers doesn't go anywhere. I've gone super long in this episode, so I'm trying to wrap up quickly. Locked on Blazers doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to do 5 shows a week until August. Middle of August, in fact. It's April. 4 months of off-season shows. So what's going to happen? Tomorrow, we'll do X interviews takeaways. The Blazers did X interviews today. I'll talk about everything we learned, the things that we learned, and what you need to know coming out of those X interviews, where Chauncey Billups spoke and Joe Cronin spoke, and a bunch of the Blazers players spoke as well. We'll talk about draft prospects and all those things moving forward. The Blazers, by winning 36 games, finished tied with the Suns. They've got a 17% chance at the top 4 overall pick. They're splitting the odds with the Suns, 9 and 10, and a 3.75% chance at the number 1 overall pick. A tiebreaker for who goes, if neither of the team jumps the lottery with the order, and who gets the remaining combo that they're splitting will be decided by a coin flip. And we will talk about when that comes. But we'll look at the draft, where the Blazers are likely to draft, and all of those scenarios. And then we'll do our player profiles for a season wrap-up. We'll revisit my preseason predictions and talk about what I got right and what I got wrong through the season. That's just the beginning. We'll keep them moving through off seasons with trades and free agency and all of that. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. The season is done, and Locked On Blazers is still rolling along. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.